I think my whole life I've carried things that I didn't know were mental health struggles. I've always struggled with things like feeling like I'm valued enough or that like I was worthwhile, and just feelings of stress and anxiety all the time. I didn't really know what the reason was to keep going. I just thought to myself, like, there's no way for me to get rest other than to end my life. One night in October of 2022, I think was the worst it ever got, where after 4 days of not sleeping, I just came up with the solution that if I just ended my life, I would be able to rest forever. And it seemed like a very peaceful solution. And then this thought came to me, like, tell your wife what's going on, what you're thinking. She was in school and she had a test the next day, and so I woke her up and told her, like, I'm not in a good place, my thoughts are really dark, and I think the only solution to my problem is to end my life. She sat up right away and was like, I'm gonna not go to school tomorrow, I'm gonna stay home with you. You need to be somewhere with someone. You need to get into therapy and start talking these things out, because that's not what God would want for you. I started looking for a Christian therapist the next day. The first thing he had me do was go through the book of John as slowly as possible and just kind of spend time in it. He said, don't spend time reading the Bible, like, or in the Word, spend time with the Word inside of you. And so I spent time reading it very slowly. It took me about 3 or 4 months to get through the book of John, just like every day reading a little bit here and there. Through doing that and other like coping mechanisms he got, like, taught me, I started to deal with my issues rather than just push them down. A lot of that was just like staying constantly in the Word. Like, one thing I do still every day is I read a chapter of the Bible every morning and spend some time praying and listening for God's voice every morning. And the mornings I do that, my anxiety and depression are at their lowest. Made it apparent like how much Jesus cared for the people that were his disciples, and that these struggles are not just like mine. I am his son, and I am loved by him, and there's a reason that I'm here and that I'm still here, and to continue moving forward. That next year, my New Year's like resolution to live as many years loving life as I had wanting it to end. Then the Brazil trip came up, and I turned to my wife and I was like, I think I want to do the Brazil trip. And she said, I think you should. Just had this idea that I was going to be going there to give back with like my medical expertise, and it would be like me giving back for what God did for me. But then I got down there and I saw like the joy of people down there, and that encouraged me further. The first village we stopped in, we were doing a church service, and I ended up telling my testimony of what I was going through, still pretty actively going through a lot of it. 22 or so people were able to commit themselves to Christ after my testimony and the sermon. They said that there was somebody in the village going through the same things I was going through, and that was why it touched so many people. It was amazing to see that across worlds, across culture, countries apart, like, we all struggle with the same things, and God can use a million different ways to get to you. I always felt when I was at the worst that I was alone, and that people would think that I was quote unquote crazy or weird. But I want to encourage people that, like, you can't carry it by yourself. God designed us to work in community, to live in community with people, and that means being vulnerable. There's nothing wrong with you that you can't share with somebody in church that you're close to, a dear friend, a spouse, parent. You have to tell somebody about what's going on, because the weight gets a lot easier when there's more than one person to carry it. So I know the holidays can be very difficult. There's a lot of expectations around them on how we should act and the joy that we should feel, but not everybody feels that joy all of the time. But I think being in community with people during the worst and the most difficult times is the most important. And The Long Winter's Night service is an opportunity to be in community, in God's presence, worshiping and spending time with God and being real and vulnerable with those around us to help us through those difficult times. So if you or anybody you know is struggling with those things, I would encourage you to come to the service and be part of that.